that people are coming in, so let us please wait for another minute so that people can arrive, and then we start all together in 1 minute. To our workshop, Responsible Innovation for Smart City. My name is Ursula Kopp. I'm part of the team of the Institute for Managing Sustainability at the Vienna University of Economics Business in Vienna. I will be the facilitator for today. My own background is landscape architecture, and over the past couple of years, I've focused on stakeholder dialogues and the facilitation of those, and also co-creation workshops and how to work with people to make them become more innovative. In my role as a facilitator, first I will introduce the team who's going to talk to you today and tell you what are we going to do and how we have planned to work with you. The project we are talking about is the Living Innovation Project, a huge EU project, an industry-driven EU project that has been running for 3 years. And there is a whole team of people here who want to share their experiences with you today. And I would like to start, first of all, with Andre Martinuzzi, the head of our institute and also the leader of this project.
Also, warm welcome from my side, wherever you are from Vienna, from Austria, from Europe, or from somewhere else around the world. We've been dealing with responsible innovation now for more than 3 years, and it's been stay at the beginning. So thank you. We've been dealing with responsible innovation for the last 3 years. For me, the most important experience in this case was the different languages, the languages of the business sector, the language of the scientists, the language of different regions, different disciplines, and I'm quite curious to learn about the language and your understanding of responsible innovation in smart cities.
Okay. May I also ask the others who are here today from our side to introduce yourself in a quick, short way for the beginning now, and then everybody will talk later on their topic. Catherine.
Hello, my name is Catherine Flick. I'm a reader in computing and social responsibility at De Montfort University, which is like an associate professor. I'm a technology ethicist, and my role in the Living Innovation Project was to look at co-creation with people of a lower socioeconomic status within the deprived parts of Leicester in the UK. That was part of my role, and that's what I'll be talking about today.
Thank you very much. Art van Berlo is joining us from the Netherlands today. Okay, maybe it's not here.
The mute, yes. Art van Berlo from the Netherlands, Eindhoven, and working for Smart Homes, partner in the Living project. That's all. Yeah.
That's all, and more of you later. Thank you very much, Art. And Klaus-Peter Wegge from Germany is part of the team.
Hello, this is Klaus Wegge. I'm head of the Siemens Accessibility Competence Center. It's a group inside of Siemens which is dealing with accessibility. That means access to products and services for older persons or persons with disabilities. And we tried to introduce co-creation to this special group of users, and we will report later.
Thank you very much for this short introduction. On the next slide, you can see what we have planned for this meeting. So we will have short talks by each of the people who just introduced themselves on their special topic. In this order, we will have the possibility for questions and answers, but please feel free to put any questions you might have during the talks into the chat immediately, and we will try to answer them as soon as possible so that we can also get in touch with you and hear what your questions and thoughts are. And after that, this will be about 45-50 minutes roughly, and after that we would love to go into an interactive discussion with all of you. This is from my side for now, and then let's get started. If you have any technical problems, if you can use the chat and write to us, we will try to solve things. Yeah, let's get started with Professor Andrea Martinuzzi to give you an idea of the whole project and what the aims were and what we were working on.
Well, before presenting to you what the project was about, I'm curious about you. Have you ever come across the term responsible research and innovation? In short, RRI, or just responsible research or responsible innovation? Could you please type into the chat right now just a figure between 0 and 10? 0 if you never heard about it, 10 if you're a pro. So if you're in this area of responsible research and innovation for many, many months, years, then it's 10. And somewhere in between, that might be your perfect number. Please type into the chat just a number so that we know a little bit more about how experienced you are with this concept. Thank you. So we've got some pros and some newbies. So we hope that we have something for every one of you. For the ones who ever came across the concept, you ever heard about it, could you just briefly write into the chat, what is your understanding of responsible research and innovation? If you would have to explain this to, let's say, your 12-year-old nephew in one sentence, how would you explain it? What is responsible research and innovation to you, or to the ones that talked about it before? Just briefly write a few words into the chat, please. How would you explain it? That's not a test. No, don't worry. We're not in a multiple choice test. I'm not not challenging you. I'm just interested in the meaning of this term in your community. I think that there are many different communities talking about this issue. Okay, user-centered, new products that have a positive influence on the planet. It's environmental impacts, environmental systems, sustainable, a lot of different understandings. When I approached this issue of responsible research innovation for the first time, my background was and is in sustainable development and in corporate social responsibility. So I have a background in thinking about the future, sustainability, everything that works for 10 billion people in 500 years, the easiest definition of sustainable. Whatever you do, if you can do it for 500 years, and if 10 billion people can do it, then it's sustainable. Or corporate social responsibility, what companies do, how they perceive their responsibility. And then, for me, responsible research innovation was interesting because I thought it's a specific application of sustainability and responsibility to the area of innovation management. And before starting the project Living Innovation that I have the pleasure to coordinate now for more than 3 years, we've done a kind of stock taking. we looked who are the others, who are the ones who already got funding from the European Commission. And if you don't know, well, now you know there were more than 100 projects funded by the European Commission, specifically on the topic of responsible research and innovation. 100 projects, 250 million euro European money went into this area, developing tools, developing roadmaps, developing understandings. And living innovation is one of them. Next slide, please. And it's one of the first ones when it started. It was the first one that was started from an industry background with industry partners. Why? Because before, responsibility was framed as an ethical issue, as a societal issue, as an environmental issue. But for many innovation managers, these were burdens, additional burdens. They have to work on the next big thing. They have to deliver. They are competing with other companies, with other innovation managers from Asia, from Silicon Valley. And it's super competitive. And if you approach them and you tell them, well, you have to think about ethics, you have to think about the future, you have to think about the world, they perceive this quite often as an additional burden. And we tried to frame it as a business opportunity, to develop a narrative that businesses would understand responsible innovation as an opportunity, together with 14 partners in a specific area, which was smart homes, smart health. We've chosen this issue area on purpose because we thought that's something where a lot of things will happen. This is where a lot of new technologies will hit our daily lives, will change our daily lives, and also people are directly affected. If it changes your home, it changes your life, it changes your health. This is why we've chosen that. Next slide, please. What we developed is a kind of narrative of responsible innovation in a three-step way. We said we talk about responsibility and we combine it with innovation. There is a business case, there are societal benefits, and there are some underlying concepts that we already have at hand. So it's not rocket science. It's not we have to develop everything anew. Next slide, please. So when we talk about impacts, it's about responsibility for these impacts. Every innovation will have an impact. Well, actually, every activity of a company has an impact. And that's the basic understanding of corporate social responsibility. You're responsible for your impacts. And it's just a specific application of this responsibility concept when you take care about future impacts of your new technology, of your new product, of your new service, of your new next big thing. So you innovate also with a purpose. You innovate not just for market share, for profit, you innovate for causing impacts, positive impacts on society, on the environment. So it orientates your innovation towards grand societal challenges, and it translates the solution of these grand societal challenges into a business case. So the business case, if you consider this, is additional market share, additional opportunities. But on the other hand, if you have potential negative impacts, you create the next big damage. You have the next whatever, Contagan, the next asbestos. Perhaps it's good to take care about these impacts in advance and to avoid sunken costs and to avoid risks. The second big story, next slide, please, is about participation. It's about innovating with the people and for the people. So it's the responsibility towards stakeholders. And many companies say, oh, Ray, we already do that. We have open innovation and lead user innovation. And if you have a closer look and if you talk to them, they will tell you whom they invite. And in many cases, they invite the usual suspects. Wealthy, urban, young, male, techno nerds. This is obviously the target group where everybody's keen on having them involved in the innovation processes. Not so wealthy people, not so urban, not so high educated, not so nerdy. Well, then it's quite tricky how to involve them. And Catherine Flick will tell you later on how to do that, how to innovate with low-income families. So children, low-income urban areas, how to involve them. So innovating with the people and for the people is a source of inspiration. It's a source of creativity, and it helps you to develop more and better fitting ideas. And there's a third element, and the third element might be the most complex one on the next slide. It's about innovating within systems. We are all surrounded by systems. We're surrounded by a health system. Now, after COVID, we know about our health system. A financial system, well, it broke down about 10 years ago. Mobility system, education system. All of these systems were never designed. They emerged. and they have their flaws. So if we could co-create whole systems with a higher potential to solve all these grand societal challenges, to at least to address them, and we can innovate on a higher level. For the individual company, this means they can be game changers. They're no longer rule takers, they're rule breakers. And by breaking the rules, they are the rule makers of tomorrow. So we talk about more radical innovation. We talk about co-creation between companies together in networks. And we also talk about this transition towards sustainability and a more resilient system. So these were the three elements that we developed as an understanding of responsible innovation in our project. And we think that it's quite applicable for companies. And we will see today if it's applicable for smart cities as well. On the next slide, you will see what we've done. We set up a virtual community platform. Next, please. And we implemented a series of innovation labs. So these were just workshops all across Europe. Next slide, please. And so after 3 years, we can look back on quite a number of deliverables and achievements, and also some useful experiences for us and for the participants. We recorded and we disseminated more than 100 videos. We ran more than 20 webinars. We currently develop innovation blueprints and showcases where we can show you what came out of this project. We all have a compendium of community interaction, which will be ready also at the end of the project. Very fresh, really, really new, 3 days before it has been published, a co-creation toolkit, some policy briefs. We're currently developing a book and some presentations. And next slide, please. Today, now we gain insights into the concept of responsive innovation. This was my job for the last 10 minutes. And now we continue with learning how to co-create our future innovation streams. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andre. And then Catherine will continue with the topic co-creation processes in small homes and smart health. Smart homes and smart health.
Thanks very much. Thank you very much, Andre, for that great introduction. So I'm going to pick up where Andre left off and explain a little bit about how we ran some of our co-creation labs and give you an example from the DMU lab that we ran with low socioeconomic families. So one of the objectives of the Living Innovation Project was to co-create innovations for smart future living and to demonstrate responsible research and innovation as an opportunity, particularly for businesses, applying and improving ROI tools for industry. So looking at what was there and potentially improving it or showing different applications of those tools. And then to achieve meaningful industry and citizen co-creation, particularly with those who are perhaps not those usual suspects. And the idea of this is that it would provide space of the Living Innovation Project is that it provides space for industry leaders to develop new innovative ideas in the area of smart futures together with knowledgeable citizens and lead users based on the principles of responsible research and innovation. So in 2019, we focused on the topics for our co-creation labs of future homes and lifestyles, Internet of Things in daily life, and lifelong health and care. And Ad van Berlo is going to talk a little bit about some of the results from the rest of these co-creation labs. I'm just mostly going to talk about the process that we used. In 2020, we ran a series of co-creation labs with the topic of fitness and preventative healthcare, communities and collaboration, and finally high tech at home, which is the example I'll be talking about today. So we had 10 co-creation workshops in Spain, the Netherlands, and Germany with around 100 participants, with 7 follow-up webinars that were recorded with approximately 80 participants, and we'll be summarizing the learnings. We've summarized the learnings and put together. We've just about to publish our co-creation toolkit that shows off some of the learnings and suggestions for how to go about these labs if you're interested in doing them yourselves. So that was in 2019. And in 2020, we ran another 10 co-creation workshops, once again in Spain, in the UK and Germany, with regular follow-up webinars. And the idea is obviously with the lockdown, it became a really interesting platform for us to look at potential virtual co-creation opportunities. So that was in fitness and preventative healthcare, communities and collaboration, and finally, high tech at home. So we came up with a series of quality criteria for co-creation before we set up our workshops. We had a selection, some of these were the selection of our participants, with obviously the low quality being whoever shows up versus a targeted selection based on well-defined criteria. We had workshop location as a quality criterion, interaction before the workshop, time of the workshop, like the amount of time required. And that was an interesting one that changed up quite significantly over lockdown. As you can probably imagine, doing a whole day Zoom meeting is not really the most exciting time for people. Remuneration, facilitation, moderation methods, processing of results, and the scope of potential results. And some of the key results that we came up with in terms of how do we go through the process of developing these. We came up with a recruitment strategy. We looked at a minimum of 4 hours, although this kind of changed a little bit depending on during the lockdown, based on some of the requirements that lockdown brought. We tried to have neutral or trained facilitators in order to allow for the best interactions. And we make sure that the participants need to know how we process the results. So for the university-based things, we went through ethical review policies and things like that. And finally, we made sure that we were seeking to solve a key question, which allowed us to ensure that we were actually answering real questions that were important to both industry and society. So in the DMU lab, the main goal was to elicit technology ideas that could enhance the way that we live at home. We wanted to try a creative method instead of a classic focus group to see what might happen with that. And we particularly wanted to target those living in deprived parts of Leicester in the UK who are unlikely to take part in traditional research. So we involved families and we created artworks over a series of 4 weeks under lockdown, where we had 12 families that took part with at least 1 adult and 1 child above 6, although we found that actually a lot of the larger family, like we had cousins and aunts and uncles all joining in, grandparents as well in some cases, because a lot of these homes that they were living in are large family homes. So that was actually a really nice outcome from this particular approach. Half of our families were from deprived parts of Leicester, and many only had phone internet. So doing the artworks, which I'll show you in a little bit, some of them were only very bad phone camera uploads. All of our families completed all 3 workshops and a follow-up Zoom interview where we asked them to go into a bit deeper descriptions of the artworks. And we mostly had non-white families as well. And that's partly because of the demographics of the areas of Leicester that we were interested in. We gave a £40 shopping voucher incentive to complete the workshops because they were time and these people were working for us essentially. So we thought it was appropriate for us to remunerate them. And we had a 100% satisfaction with the workshop. And I'll talk a little bit about that later as well. So the approach that we used was kind of like a design thinking style approach. It wasn't pure design thinking, but we took inspiration from it, where we gave each family the question, what problems in your home could future technology solve? And they would come up with a problem. They drew an artwork of that problem. Then we switched it with another family who drew a solution to their problem. And then we gave the solution back to the original family and asked them to either modify it or come up with a different solution if they didn't like the solution that they got, essentially. And the way that we did that was we had 3 online asynchronous art workshops where we did that process. We had videos by a well-known local artist who usually runs art workshops with these children in non-lockdown conditions, John Joe Elliott, who's down there on the right-hand side. So he did some inspirational videos with his family, and we did all of the organization of this by email over a series of 4 weeks. So we gave them a week to complete each task. In order to recruit, which was the hardest part of this, we tried a bunch of different approaches. So we have an existing relationship with communities in these parts, in the deprived parts of Leicester through our university. So we advertised on their Facebook page and things like that. We also advertised on a local radio talk show where we talked about the project and asked to see if people were interested and if they wanted to sign up for it. But the most effective one was recruiting by word of mouth through a network of mums that I'm on. So I've been a new mum recently, and I joined a local mums group, and essentially this is where we got a large number of our family participants. And it just goes to show the power of networks and knowing the communities that you're going to be engaging with if you want to engage in these sorts of activities. So this is an example of what we did. So the first week, this family drew themselves being very bored under lockdown, where, you know, this TV program is boring, says one. I hate lockdown, says another one. Another one's hassling mum, and mum says, I'm busy. And up the top right-hand side, it says, help. So this is under lockdown. So these run in June. So it was a couple of months into lockdown. So people were starting to get pretty bored by the stage, and the children particularly. So they switched with another family who came up with this Boredom Buster app, and it would allow the kids to pick what they wanted to do. And then theoretically, it would have the facilities to show them how to do it. So they sent that back to the original family, and the original family thought this was great and decided to stick it inside a robot that would actually be able to physically play with the children as well. So it has the app kind of running within its tummy, so to speak, and you can see that they are there's still the same sorts of options available, but it's a more physical thing. So you can see here some of the ideas that so we have a whole load of different types of problems. So lots of problems about lockdown. We had problems about mess, which is a fairly common one in people's homes, I think. Recycling and general waste had a couple of problems. We had some problems about safety, and lots of several insect related problems. So people had ants coming in the home or spiders. And then we had sort of communication and lack of English issues as well. So there was some ones that kind of there's some really interesting issues that were trying to be solved here by our families. So the main key take home messages that we got from this particular set of workshops is that you know, we need to. So responsible innovation generally advocates engaging with all stakeholders, but this is hard to do with traditional methods that usually cater to wealthy middle-class people who have time and money and ability to travel. Technology needs diverse voices to present problems, co-create solutions, and show their needs. And these labs exemplify a rich diversity, although the technology is not so future, it's just potentially about accessibility of that technology. Alternatives to traditional focus groups are necessary to elicit thoughts, concerns, and future hopes from non-traditional stakeholders. The fact that this engaged those families for so long and over that period of weeks is really impressive for any sort of research activity. Working with low-income families in traditional workshops would have mostly only engaged non-working mothers with children. So we managed to get the whole family involved, and that's actually one of the key things they loved about the workshops. And finally, working asynchronously online allowed for all kinds of families to get involved with discussions over the dinner table, in the car, and on walks and things. So we weren't limited to a physical space. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Catherine. I'd like to repeat that please feel free to put questions in the chat if you have any right now, and then we will do the talking together later after all the presentations. Art van Berlo will be the next one to talk about some of the responsible innovation outcomes and applications of this project.
Yep, thank you. Next, yes. Well, as you could see from the overview, we have done a lot of workshops. I'm not going to give detailed results of all these, like Catherine has done in her workshop. That would be taking too much time and maybe also boring. On the other very important aspect is that some companies, some of our well, we have partners that are companies, and some companies are working now on the follow-up ideas within some confidentiality. So that means we cannot bring everything here on the floor. Well, in Smart Homes, we did 3 workshops on these themes: sleep innovations, augmented and virtual reality, and social robotics. So this was one in 2019, so no lockdown, no COVID-19 problematics at that time. So we invited the citizens of the first two workshops in our demo and test smart home. We had here in the first topic on sleep innovation some new technologies in the bedroom, in the smart bedroom. And well, then we discussed for about 3.5 to 4 hours several options, what the citizens thought about things like sleeping, how it can be improved, what several aspects were important to work on. And what we, in fact, we found two important things that we further still working out, and also in the innovation blueprints, as Andre said in the beginning. One was that some people think that having all these data, and you see that also here in the slide, they were concerned about what would happen with their data, sleep data, and you probably all know this time the smartwatches collect already a lot of data on your sleep. But if you don't want that, you should be able to, well, of course you can take your watch off. That's the most simple thing in working on sleep innovation. But in other aspects in the smart home, apart from sleep, you should also be able to have a switch off button for not spreading the data to the companies that we all know that are collecting the data. So we work now with a small SME that is working that out in a prototype. A prototype has been built, and well, we are now taking that in our blueprint as said earlier. Another example that we are working out right now, or at least looking into the area of what is possible, who is working on that, is on noise cancellation in the bedroom. That is, of course, one of the major issues, noise, not only when you live close to an airport, but also in big cities and so on. So what can you do about that? So smart windows, smart window ideas are being worked out by also in some small companies right now, and we will have a future workshop, innovation corner, we call that, to further discuss that. I'm not going further in too much detail. As I said, augmented and virtual reality, we, as a spin-off also of this workshop, we had already a workshop on an innovation corner on HoloLens, HoloLens opportunities in the near future, and we will continue working on that. Social robotics, we did that not in our demo smart house, but in a nursing home environment, since social robotics are increasingly used for entertaining, but also helping older people for a while during the day. And here we found that code of ethics are needed when algorithms are being made. Also, as a spin-off of this workshop, we work now with a nursing home where there are several social robotics in development from all kinds of small companies and bigger ones, as you know. But here we also take into account what was said during this workshop. So this was one slide. I'm not going to take too much time in the next few slides, but Telefonica had, for instance, a workshop, and they, well, I'm not going into the topics here because it's Telefonica did not really want to do that. They were conducted in a normal flat. They found that the concept of responsible innovation is difficult to explain to citizens. I think we should go now to the next slide. We had one with Siemens, but later on, after me, Klaus-Peter Wegge will also say a lot more about that. So I think we should also go to the next slide right now. Autobot is another company that had workshops, particularly here for people with amputees, so with that needed new artificial limbs in legs and arms, and they also had responsible innovation workshops. Yeah, you can read here some of the outcomes in here. Next slide.
We cannot hear you well now.
Ah,
now it's better again.
Sorry for that.
It's okay again. Thanks.
Okay. Okay, so maybe my my Wi-Fi connection is not working well. Next slide, please. Yeah, and also Atos did. I mentioned, I think earlier, one of the companies that they were particularly on smart health solutions, but they are also protecting right now the outcomes and working on it in a more closed environment. Yeah, you can read some of the generic outcomes. Participants learn about the topic and about co-creation techniques. So yeah, these are quite generic and are more or less similar in all kinds of, in all the workshops that we performed. Although we must say, of course, distinguish once more, as also Catherine said, in 2019, we had the live workshops with people in the room, and here Atos and the previous two were also virtual. Next one, I think that's it, and we hand over now to Klaus-Peter Wegge.
Thank you very much for your talk. I would like to stop. Okay. I would like, can you see me now? Funny sign. Yeah, I would like to stop just for a second because we got two questions here from the chat. And there is one that came a little later while Ed was talking, and the other one came just after Catherine had stopped. So may I ask Catherine first? Yes. Maybe you can you see the question?
Yes,
I
can.
It?
So the question is, how do you make sure people do not get disappointed or even frustrated if they are co-designing something and later on it's not implemented or implemented elsewhere or too expensive and hence not available to them? So that was an Anita Scubida. Thank you very much for your question. So yeah, this is actually something interesting that came out of our discussions, because one of the things we found with our workshops is that the technology actually, for the most part, the technologies the families came up with, they actually already exist. So things like robots and apps for doing, different sorts of things, and some of the more complex virtual reality stuff. I mean, some of the technology already exists, but it's too expensive, or it's not accessible because it's not miniaturized enough, or, it's basically at a cutting edge level of development. So in many ways, it will probably happen that these technologies they came up with may come into existence in some way or form in the next few years anyway, just because of the nature of how the technology is being developed. But we weren't specifically co-creating with a company. Now, some of the companies that the Living Innovation Project has been working with, and Klaus-Peter is going to give a really good example of this in the talk he's about to give, is actual real impact in terms of the co-creation activities, and showing citizens that they do have an impact on large company outputs, essentially. So in terms of if you were doing this at a very high level kind of, so ours was really looking forward to the future of 2030. It's about managing expectations a bit, right? So it's supposed to be a visionary, a kind of artistic, a creative approach that may not necessarily, and we deliberately told our participants to really think outside the box. Don't think about potentially what's constrained by current technology. So some of our families came up with the idea of these little butterflies that flutter around and translate things for you, for example. So I mean, that's not really something that we're likely to have, but it was a yeah. Anyway, so the idea is it's basically about managing expectations depending on the scale of the workshop, of the timeline of the interactions, essentially, and what might come out.
Thank you very much, Catherine. There is another question that came in at the beginning when Ed started to talk very soon. How secure is data you are collecting, Ed? Can you say something about that?
I'm not sure which data the person means with this question. How secure is data you are collecting?
I believe it was the sleep data. I saw this one pop up during the sleep data. Yep.
Yeah, the sleep
Thank
data. Well, I'm using my own sleep data in many ways to also learn from that for a number of years. Yeah, I have consented to send it to the companies, to both Apple and to Aura, the company that these two companies collect my data. So that's yeah, how secure is that? I know they are working. They give me feedback on my daily trends and so on. So yeah, I'm not sure, or if you are collecting any other personal data from the user. Any other personal data from the user? Yeah, well, as these two companies, they know a lot about me, but I get back a lot of information from giving my data, so that's a choice. Are they misusing it? No, I don't see that right now in the way of Apple and Aura. Apple doesn't send me other information or advertisements on their products since I use it so I don't think so. But we have to be aware of that. We can say a lot about data collection and you know that from Google and Amazon and all these companies. But I'm not sure if I could say something more right now.
Okay, that just
is sharing something right now, so maybe we can have a look at that. Yeah.
Okay, about health data. Yep. Andre just shared the link with you. Okay, thank you very much, Ed. So now we can switch to the next talk, Klaus-Peter Wegge. This will be a topic that is probably closer to what you are doing in city development. It's on mobility issues. Happy to hear about that. Klaus-Peter?
Yeah. I want to report a little bit about a workshop. It's more a workshop series with persons with reduced mobility. We performed several types of workshops with, for other topics, but this topic, smart mobility and how can be improved for persons with reduced mobility, this was a little bit getting a dynamic which we never expected, because this workshop ends up in a series of workshops, and indeed the series is not ending yet. We conducted this workshop with the intention to identify functionality requirements for a mobile application which helps persons with reduced mobility, and which helps, of course, to identify relevant information and assistive services during their journey to create an easier movement in the public environment, in public transport. What are the user groups? What are the user requirements, the usage types? The next slide shows you the diversity of this user group. We have users without no vision or with very limited vision, with limited or without color perception. We have without hearing or low hearing, and so on. We have persons, we have limited language abilities. We have persons with limited handling or strengthen, which is important when riding a bus, with limited reach range. And of course, there are people who are depending on assistance or on assistive devices, which have to be considered when on the journey. I would like to make an example. This is about a bus or a tram or a train. What information are required when on the bus or on the journey. This is for the first step, the information about the station or the bus. This is the static information. We want to know a little bit more about the vehicle. For example, is it a low floor bus? We want to know a lot of information, real-time information. This is dynamic information. Then the vehicle approaches or is arriving the station. We want to know information about the ride, what is happening during the ride and what is perhaps happening which is not expected, is not scheduled. And we want to have access to some services. The typical service request is a stop request. Another possible action is the activation of the acoustic door detection signal. I have to explain this a little bit. Blind people need to find the door to enter the vehicle. And this can be identified by an acoustic signal, which is transmitted very close or at the door. So you can simply follow this acoustic signal to enter the vehicle. But this is, of course, a sound which is annoying normal users, so it should be only available on request. Of course, the next issue is the request for lowering the vehicle, that the bus kneels down for an easier access, or the request to open all doors at the same time because it's easier to find an open door to operate an automatic door. You can imagine there are some more ideas which can be considered. And of course, there is a special topic. We are approaching new technologies, the automation, the automatic driving shuttles. And this is, of course, a very big challenge for persons with reduced mobility, no driver, no assistance, no fallback strategy. And we are trying in another project, which is somewhere related to the living project, to figure out what are the special requirements on that. What are other ideas from this workshop? Acoustic signals in public space are helping guiding blind or visually impaired persons. And we can, of course, you know it perhaps from your hometown, you can use acoustic traffic lights. And of course, it is reasonable if you can activate the pilot or the release signal, the acoustic release signals by mobile application, because in this case, the signals do not disturb other users if they are not required. And of course, the same is with railway crossings. But we can also use acoustic signals for so-called acoustic beacons. That is a small device which helps you to locate, for example, the entrance at a station or the exit of a platform, also on. And of course, you may also, by the way, this is very common in Japan. Of course, you can use acoustic signals for identifying lifts, their location and their operation, or you can also use it to identify dangerous situations. For example, these awful e-scooters which are parked and stored everywhere they should not be. Okay, on the other hand, all these are kind of ideas. On the other hand, we need an application which fulfills all, which supports these ideas. And this application has special requirements. It has, of course, to be very accessible for this group. That means we need an optimized, accessible design. We need an individual configuration. We need a clear and sustainable support of built-in assistive functions of the device. Maybe you know from your smartphone, so things like voice over or talk back, and only the solution should only provide those information which are relevant in the right time, no additional information. And it should be in task-related design. That means the application should filter the information for me. We need a consistency of the screen layout, and of course we need a pre-booking of services, because a safety journey is the highest priority, and I don't want to play around with an application when the bus arrives and when I'm in a very busy and maybe challenging situation to find the bus, to find the tram. The following slide gives you um, um, an example of a screenshot of such an application. And now this is the point where we are leaving the Living project. We are going beyond, because I had the opportunity to, in cooperation with the University of Paderborn, to have a master thesis where we had the first implementation of this idea. And this, of course, it's in German language at the moment, is the first approach. It looks very, very simple, but that's exactly the idea we need. What is the outlook? The good thing of this workshop series is that persons were extremely interested to move things forward. And we had a test implementation field here in the city of Paderborn. We are lucky because the local network provider of buses, two technology companies and the University of Paderborn are working together. So we have a test field where we can test this first implementation and figure out what can we improve, what are the services, how do we work, are they in time. On the other hand, the engagement was even higher. That means it is functional requirement of services and technologies are going into a German standard, DIN standard. The title is Smart Mobility for Persons with Reduced Mobility, Functional Approaches. This standard was published as a first draft in March and will reworked as a real standard in the next 6 months. And I hope we can go with this on the European level as an ETSI or a CEN norm over the next year. What is the reason for the standard? We need not a solution for a certain city. We need a solution for a certain country. At least we need a solution for Europe. And it is very, very important to cooperate with different public transport operators and with manufacturers of the respective hardware. We need this one application for all these ideas. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Klaus-Peter Wegge, for your talk. If you have any questions on what you just heard, in order to understand it better, there is room to post them now. And also Andre posted something for you, some extra information. And as a next step, we would love to get more in touch with you as the audience and find out if there is any connection between what we did and what you are doing. If we can talk together about responsible innovation and exchange some experiences. And in order to do this, there are no more questions right now. In order to do this, I would ask you to change with us the place and go to a mural platform. We installed on the platform Mural, we installed one page where we can work together now.
Don't stop being in this Zoom meeting. Yeah, don't change the place. Stay where you are. Just open Mural in another window.
Thank you, Andre. We stay here so that we can talk, and yeah, we open the Mural window. Right, Heike is going to put the link into the chat in a second. So you will find a link where you can, here it is. If you click on this link, it should be very easy that you get onto a page, onto a white big board, which says Responsible Innovation Smart Cities at the top. I'll just wait for a second to see that everybody can actually get there. And there we would like to start with the questions and combine it, the writing and the talking. For the next, we got almost 1 hour left to find out what the connections are and where can our experiences maybe linked to yours. I'll wait for another second so that I can see that most people are there. Yeah, very good. It seems to work really well. Great, so you can see yourself. What you can do on this page is you can write things. You can click on these post-its that are there, and we can also add some post-its later on. And what I would like to ask you in the first step is, would you like to write a few things to answer those questions that are there? On the one hand, on the left side, we would like to know what is most interesting to you from what you heard. I mean, not exactly what you heard in the talks, but what is interesting for your work? Is there any connection where you think, okay, this what we talked about could be interesting for your work somehow? And on the other hand, on the right side is what can we learn from you? We'd be really, really keen to know and to find out what do you think we could learn from city planners or people dealing with smart cities in the way we deal with responsible innovation. So if you click on one, you can click on a post-it and write down, maybe you have to do a double click. Please try, feel free and try. And on the left side, in this black column, you can see at the very top, you can see, yes, there it is. A sheet that looks like a post-it that's been taken off. And if you click there, you can add more post-its. You can draw post-its from the left to the right, but we will do that as well. So please feel free, take a couple of minutes to think about what could maybe you learn from us and what can we learn from you. We would love to find out and then exchange on that and have a talk on what you think. If you have any troubles, you can still write to us in the chat. So we would first collect what you write down and then have time to talk about it. Thank you very much. If you write in detail, then it's really interesting for us to find out what you think. As you can see, you can make the post-its bigger so that they're readable. Okay, maybe you want to take 1 or 2 more minutes if there is anything you'd like to add. But it seems that most people have written what they wanted to write down. Okay, great. Thank you very much for the written feedback on that. I would now ask our presenters and you together to look at them and have a talk about what you see and what you find out and what's interesting to you. I'd rather, because we are not that many people, I think we can start a chat, and if somebody says something and you feel that you want to say something too, then just step in and do so. May I maybe ask Andre and Catherine, as the leading people of this project, is there anything that you've already noticed when looking at the cards, at the post-its, or anything that you would like to ask in order to understand better what is written on the post-its?
Well, I think I completely understand what you mean by inclusion of social groups and design of inclusion processes. Was exactly what the project was also about. This easy access system design fits together quite nicely. The circular economy thing and the decentralized power plants and sewage solutions. Well, I don't know how you learn this from our project. We haven't done anything with power plants and sewage solutions, so I'm not quite sure if this is right on the left-hand side and shouldn't go to the right-hand side, if we should learn something about sewage solutions from you. And I'm quite curious to see what you mean by research part. So if the one who wrote or noted down research part could give us a little more in-depth explanation what kind of research part he or she liked so much, that would be interesting for us. Catherine, what is your impression?
Yeah, no, exactly. I really like. I mean, I'm really pleased that the work that we did with families seems to have really hit the right spot with some people, because yeah, the socialist perspective is really, really important. It's, I mean, I'm not a smart cities expert in any way, but cities have people in them. And if you're going to be creating systems within a city or technology to, help even just designing of cities and things like that, you need to have the people involved in that. And so, yeah, so being able to sell co-creation and that style of approach to the people who are likely to be doing development of real estate, as you say, construction companies, that sort of thing. It's, yeah, really, it's hard in technology as well to do that. So it's not any, I mean, this is one of the reasons why this project exists, is to show the value of these sorts of approaches. So it's and I really think that we have seen the value of it. It's just then, how do we make sure, how do we show it to other industries, right? And this is one of the reasons that we're doing this particular workshop right now, is to let you know that it does work. You can do it. It's just about finding the right framing and the right people to show that actually there is value in doing it. And I think this comes back to these kind of unusual suspects, like the not the normal people, right? That would normally be involved, which might even be kind of like representatives from particular user groups, for example. I mean, they're probably very knowledgeable about their groups, but they may not necessarily, they might be looking at an aggregate of a bunch of different people, which shouldn't really be seen necessarily as a block. And so it's important to make sure that if you are going to get those particular high level perspectives, that you kind of, also talk with the people that they're representing, to make sure that that's, that there are, because sometimes there are useful edge cases that actually help to broaden out the ideas that you can have about how to solve certain problems, or how to design things that are most useful to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I have also, I guess I've got a question on the other side, but I guess we'll get to that one in a second. So
yeah, thank you. Yeah, let's stay on the left side for a minute. Right.
Yeah, I'd also like to know if what research part was the one.
Okay. May I also ask Ad and Klaus-Peter if there is anything that you noticed in particular on the left-hand side right now, on those cards, that people find interesting about the Living project? Yeah. Anybody wants to say something? I cannot hear you if you're trying to say something.
I try again. Okay, there is a remark that accessibility seems to be very important for public transport, and I have a feeling that the person who made this note sees a lot of potential to include more persons with reduced mobility in this process. I'm preferring this term, persons with reduced mobility, in the sense of approaching more persons than only persons with disability. This also includes persons who are part-time handicapped or who have simply a lot of luggage and so on. So I see an indication we can do more in co-creation for public transport and moving and living in public spaces.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse me, I don't know if it's okay to ask as just as
Yes,
I don't know.
yes, please, of course.
I would like to somehow, well, not explain, but add a little bit to the one card I was writing on the left-hand side, is how to sell co-creation innovation. I have a certain interest. I didn't follow the project as I could have or as I should have, so I'm not that familiar with the results from you, but this, what I was writing here, is something, okay, I'm working for a large, well-known Austrian construction company, and part of this construction company is also developing buildings, business buildings, but also for living, for apartments. So whatever you can build, we can build it somehow. And of course, I know how to deal with the colleagues there, and to explain research is important, innovation is totally important, and we don't need to explain this here in this group, but honestly, I cannot reach them in some way, because at the end it turns out, well, we are building a certain building, it costs like a certain amount of money, and then we add our success fee or our fee, and then it costs a little bit more, then we sell it. So why should we do this? So this is, my card is, I'm interested in this, but I don't know what would be the answer from your side.
Okay.
I made it clear somehow.
Thank you very much for your question, and also for explaining your background and why you want to ask this. May I give this back to the speakers?
Well, first of all, the question is, like always, do you sell it to the market or do you sell it to people? So do you want to involve the future users in a way that you know what they want, or are you sure that your market research is capable of knowing this in advance? For sure, it takes longer to ask the people, to involve the people. Participation takes time and could also show you that there are conflicting interests, there are different interests, but it gives you more in-depth knowledge, much more deeper knowledge than any market research could provide you with. The second question is, how standardized is your product, or how individualized is it? So if your standard flat always looks the same on every place, in every floor, on every level, in every building, then it's a standardized project, just like apples and oranges. You do not co-create apples and oranges, you just grow them. If it's an individualized product, which normally is a little bit higher priced, because it's quality leadership, not price leadership, then you might consider also tailoring it more to your future users. And this means to know them, and this or sometimes means to involve them. I know that most of the time these individualized solutions are high priced and are market niches, while the mass market always or quite often goes into standardization. So this is the main question. What is your company? Price leader, quality leader, both at the same time? Doesn't work out. So many companies want to be both at the same time, wouldn't work out. And the question is, can you run any kind of pilot? So if you would really like to sell it to a real estate developer, pilot it. First case, it's just don't change the whole company just for the sake of the future. But when we have all these pop-up things, you put them up, you put them away if it doesn't work, and if it works, it might stay. Could do the same with a kind of pilot in your company. I don't know. Ever tried it?
Thank you. I just noted.
Did you ever try it? Has there ever been any kind of participatory real estate co-design experiment in your company?
Well, if then at a very, very small level, not on a somehow process level, so that we can do it for certain, like you said before, this tailored to especially end user products. So that's not happening in some organizations, because we own a lot of smaller organizations, companies. They may do this, but not for. You were right, on the right track with these standard products, because we have a lot of standard products. So there it doesn't make that much sense probably, but or it will take more time to explain. But for the tailored products, we could pilot it. Yeah, this could be a possibility.
Perhaps I can push Ursula Kopp a little bit from her role as a moderator of this event today to her role as a mediator and facilitator, because she runs several stakeholder and user co-creation processes. Tell us a little bit about it. Perhaps you're the right person to answer this question because you know much more about it. And she's living in such a kind of housing experiment.
Thank you, Andre. So I live in a co-housing project where an old farmhouse was renovated and rebuilt into a house for 20 families, where we live together, and we also organize ourselves individual together, and we plan everything together, and we're organized that way. I know from some examples, because you're not naming the company, so I'm not going to name the company, but I know from some examples in Vienna where estate companies try to get in touch with the people who are going to live in the house and try to develop some things together. I think it's mostly about making the place maybe greener or develop the common places they can use. This is what I've heard of. And also maybe try to build something like a community also in bigger houses in the town, so that you can avoid to have later conflicts later on. And maybe if people get to know each other early and they can talk about things and they learn to be in touch, then you can maybe get rid of some problems early enough. I can tell from my experience now, it does help a lot if people live closer together, and it's a totally different experience. So I was born in Vienna in a house with 180 families, 180 people. No, sorry, 180 apartments. That was it. And now I moved to a place where there are 20 families living. So it's a totally different way of life, a totally different way of how close you're connected, and how it's possible to develop things together, to talk to each other, to talk about conflicts, So it's my experience is between 0 and 100. So it's a totally different way of living compared to living in an apartment, in a house where the neighbors don't know each other. And if there is a conflict, then it's a bad conflict. That's my main experience.
Martin Marek, a question to you. How far does your construction company consider the interior of a flat? So is it just the flat? Is it the flat and the floor? Is it the flat, the floor, and whatever, the fridge? Or how far do you go with the interior regarding smart homes? Because when we talk about smart buildings, could be an issue for you, but then there's the interface to the smart home. How far is your company in considering this?
Most of the time, of course, we are that big that sometimes also smaller projects are more in detail and may also consider the interior of an apartment, but most of the time it's about the constructing the building, and then we have the building automation on top. Most of the time nowadays we have energy construction items, so to say, if you have photovoltaics or heating, district heating, whatever it is, but not on how you structure or do the apartment. This we don't do. We just have this focus on building or constructing the building, the building. Yes.
One more thing perhaps to be added, and then I would like also to ask about these pink issues here that we don't understand. We found it quite interesting that, at least, well, that's my blunt experience, smart home is a gadget issue at the moment for the nerdies. So what's the selling proposition about smart homes? It's a tiny little market share of the lead users, but smart health, that's the big promise for the elderly. And
of course, I don't agree with you, Andre.
I know we had this discussion for quite some long. At least in Austria, who's selling smart homes? It's our big telecom providers who say, well, there you have a connection, and then you remotely control whatever the heating system, and you have a camera. You can look where your cat is sleeping. But if you link it to 3 more years living independently at home and not going to a care center for elderly people, that's a big promise. And perhaps Martin Marek's company could fulfill this promise by saying, in this flat, you can stay 3 years longer, dear Granny.
It's much more complicated than we can discuss now. First of all, Martin Marek's company is a construction company and not a project developer. And that's a totally different role, although I don't know you. So.
Sometimes, yeah, we are also, sometimes we are also developing the buildings, but we're not going into the detail of arranging the apartments. But and smart home is not, smart building is a topic. Smart home is, like Mr. Martinuzzi said, a gadget from our point of view. It is not.
Yes. Well, we can have another 2 hours discussion on that. I'm not going to but the big thing is that it depends also on the economic situation. Right now, I think in most countries, most cities, we have a big shortage of houses. So then we see that houses are, there's a shortage. So the project developers can ask what they want for a house. They're not so much bothered about how it's constructed. They are not so much bothered about co-creation of smart home appliances or energy saving and so on. 10 years ago, at the previous crisis, then there was the totally different situation. So then you saw project developers coming with some exclusive new things like smart houses, smart buildings. In the meantime, yes, big companies like, I think the future will be determined by Amazon, Google, and Apple, because they are offering us in smart health and in smart homes a lot, but we still need infrastructure to the buildings, inside the homes, and of course, have everything connected. And there comes the data question. So I keep it like that. There is room for of course, co-creation, but not much at this moment, I would say. And responsible innovation. That's what the big tech companies do, really. And we can take it or not. Okay, that's just my opinion.
Okay. Thank you, Ed. May I switch over to other issues that are here on this left side? We'd really be curious to understand what you think about the research part and this circular economy. Would you be ready to explain to us why you wrote this and what it means?
Whoever wrote it.
Yeah, just unmute yourself and tell us.
Or if you don't want to, feel free to write it in the chat, because some people may not want to talk, which is totally fine. Maybe while we wait, we can move on to the other ones then.
Right, let's do that then. Yep. So what can we learn from you was the other question. And there are a few things there: new concept, new way of approach, integrated strategy approach, and simulation tools, and providing an industry point of view, but don't expect too much. Okay, that's very interesting, I think. Anybody who would like to explain a bit more, because our group is really interested in
I'm really interested in these integrated strategies and the strategy approach and simulation tools side of things. What do you mean by those, and can you give us some examples perhaps?
Because our speakers want to learn,
we want to learn.
Their
once again, if you just want to write it in the chat, or if you want to unmute and have a talk to us, that's great too.
It's just a question to give a little bit more, because just from the headline, we don't really understand what you mean. So it would be very interesting for us to learn more.
Hello.
Hello. Hello. Yeah. Welcome.
Hello. Yes, I wrote the integrated strategies because I don't know how exactly it works with different companies, but I'm from the background of spatial planning. And for us, it's always important to have that big vision that everybody follows, so that you kind of follow the same big picture and don't get lost in all the details. So I think maybe that could be something that combines all your ideas and make them even better.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Who develops such strategies to your experience? Who's the driving force in developing integrated strategies? The city, the planners, the property developers? Who are the what drivers?
What I know so far is, for example, the Vienna Smart City Strategy is from the city of Vienna and was created with many stakeholders and, of course, spatial planners. Yes, and I don't know how your strategies could be integrated into it, but I guess there is some way.
Thank you.
Okay. Right. Okay, anybody else who would tell us a bit more about what's there on the cards? New concept, a new way of approach might also be interesting. Yeah.
This is Khadar. I am from India.
Hello. Hello.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Yeah. Myself Khadar. I am from India. So in my point of view, new way of approach is nothing but actually we are into smart home startup. We are working on different smart homes. Here the thing is, day by day new technologies coming into the smart home. Somehow previously Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, right now LoRa. So here we can learn more about different technology approaches, which from where the smart cities and smart homes can get benefited. The approach, how we can approach with the new technologies.
Could you tell me from your experience in India, is smart homes technology driven? So this means, bam, there is a new technology and now what can we do with it? Or is smart homes user and need driven? I have a whatever elderly grandmother and she doesn't know how to deal, or so is it technology push or demand pull?
Yeah, it is a multiple. So we are planning in different sectors, like we are making in a four-way communication, like educated and non-educated, both can access. Like our grandma don't know how to use a smartphone. They don't know how to use a smart home also. So for them, we are going with a manual switches and like that. And here the in my point of view, what I'm saying is new way of approaching means the technology, what we are going to design, it should be give benefit to each and everyone. Just a simple example is some may use Mac, some may use Windows. Windows is a user friendly when compared to Mac is an high end. So new approach is what I want to tell you. So we have to design a one concept which everyone can get an access in easy way.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Anybody else who would like to add something or put a new issue there or respond to what you heard?
I guess also another question is, with the new concept and a new way of approach, is this the are you saying that responsible innovation is a new approach for you, or is there something that we should be learning? Is there some other new approach that you use that we can learn from?
Yeah, responsible innovation is, I think for me, it is a new approach to get different things.
Okay, we also got some messages in the chat just now. If you want to have a look. Great. Okay.
If the one who wrote "Don't expect too much from industry" would like to explain what we can expect if we don't expect too much, to your experience, what can we expect? We now worked with some industry partners during the last years. We got some experiences, but what do you mean by don't expect too much?
Yeah, that's sorry, it's me again.
Hi.
That's great.
Well, at the end, we have to sell it somehow, and we have to sell it, like you said, Mr. Martinuzzi, before, to the market, more or less, because what you said before, that we have to sell it, perhaps we have to rethink to sell it to the end user. it's a different thinking, and let's see where it leads us or where it leads me. But at the end, we are, it's either, how can I explain it? It's either driven by policies, so we have to do something in energy efficiency reasons, for example. There we have to be more efficient every year, or hopefully every year, and then we do it, and then we overfill fulfill it a little bit more, and then we are all happy and project done, and we can sell it. But smart health, smart homes, and also thinking of keeping older or elderly persons at home longer. This is for me personally not a new topic. There have been projects in the past a lot, and they all show that it's useful and that you can keep the persons at home and in the well-known environment. So it would be also useful for us to somehow fulfill these topics. But at the moment, I really have the feeling, well, just the market. You know, the business runs well. I can say that for at least the construction companies, even because of, even though Corona reduced the business a little bit, but not really much. So the business runs well. We are selling our products. Why should we change something? That's the old question. And yeah. Of course, I have a lot of answers, but yeah, I have to find other answers as well.
What we've seen is that there are different stories that we can tell to different people in companies. There's a story for the CSR manager or the sustainability manager. For these guys, they have a mission. They know about stakeholders. They know about sustainability. The only thing they don't have is access to the innovation department. They're not allowed to change anything regarding the future. In many cases, they report about the past. So for them, the big promise of responsible innovation is to see you become more impactful. You can fulfill your mission by bridging towards the innovation managers. Then you have the innovation managers. Actually, you can even differentiate between the innovators and the innovation managers. The innovation managers try to manage the horse, and the horse is the innovator. Actually, he's the one who's running, who's creative, who screws things together, who has brilliant ideas. I think there is the big challenge not to damage the creativity, not to damage the dynamics of innovation by considering too much all around. Actually, what we've done, and this is also that Ursula could talk about, we developed a kind of design thinking method to extend it to responsible design thinking. So design thinking is a well-established method, I think, in design and in industry, and we integrated responsibility into this method. So that's the goodie for the innovation manager, perhaps even for the innovator. And then you end up with the top level managers. And they might be the ones who tell you, well, it's all about competitiveness, it's all about markets, it's all about, you know, profits and so on. And for them, you might have a third story. And the third story is, well, what do you manage? You manage downwards, perhaps backwards, and you do not manage outside your company. How great would it be if you could co-design instead of always adapting to the next quarterly reports, to the next market price development, to the next crisis? So it's about resilience, and it's about becoming co-designers of the future instead of managers of the present. And that's a nice story, because I think these guys are, well, fed up in not really managing, not really designing, not really leading. They're just adapting to market prices, to any kind of short-term signals from outside. And you re-establish the proudness of a manager. They like it. So sometimes you need different stories for different people.
So just to add up to this, regarding the sustainability and bridging to innovation managers, at least from this perspective, we can report somehow that we are on the right track, at least. We set up a large department, and sustainability is getting more and more weight, even in an old-fashioned company like us, or market like us, because the construction market is quite not the most innovative one, let's say. And so the bridging is taking place. So the problem, what is now missing, is the weight probably of the innovation managers, or like you called them before. innovation departments, because this is a little bit a fashion thing, because innovation was quite new a couple of years ago and everybody called himself innovation manager and whatever. But nowadays this innovation buzzword doesn't it doesn't produce anything anymore. So the people say, again, innovation, yeah, we do innovation, yeah, blah, blah. But sustainability is now the next thing. And hopefully, because there's somehow, there are more use cases behind it, I would say, perhaps we get the weight there. So let's see. And top level managers, well, yeah.
Well, if you talk about sustainability of buildings, well, actually, this would mean that your construction company shifts the focus from finishing the building and selling it to the whole lifetime cycle of a building.
Yes, definitely.
To see the whole investment over the next 50 or 80 or 70 years, and not just to see the construction project and say, now, case closed, building accomplished, the rest is not our business.
Yes, at least there the people changed their minds in the past years, I would say, yes.
And what I heard that was also be interesting for you, that, for example, the CO2 impacts of a building are smaller than the CO2 impacts of the mobility that you might create with a building on the wrong place. So you're trying to improve the CO2 impacts by insulating and by whatever, but then you build it on the wrong place and you create so much traffic that you have more CO2 impacts by choosing the wrong location over the whole period of time. So perhaps this brings even a broader view than just to look on the building.
And this is also the part where we try in responsible innovation to bring those different communities together, because the impacts are not within our own sphere where we work normally. The impacts are outside and much broader. And that's our idea of how can we actually develop this system thinking where each sector thinks above its own sphere. Yeah.
Impacts happen in systems beyond and later. So impact is always the thing that is later and beyond the scope that you normally apply. You always have to look beyond the boundaries to say, where is the impact? And then it's the moment where you say, okay, it's not something I can control alone. It's not within my production site. It's not within my construction project. It happens beyond, but beyond means we have to co-manage it. We cannot do it alone. And there, I'm really sure that markets are not the appropriate governance mechanism, because markets cannot create something. Markets are good for oranges and apples.
Not for real co-creation and co-responsibility, you could call it. Okay. Thank you very much. Any ad hoc comments or questions on what we just saw? If not, then I'd suggest to move to the third part we have on this sheet. If you move to the right, I'm going to open. Oh, it's already there. Thank you very much, colleagues. The third question we have, because we have been thinking about this before we got to this workshop, is there anything we could do together? We from this industry level, working on projects we just explained, and you rather working in the city, in the development sector. Is there anything we could maybe develop together or think about together later on? We'd be very interested to find out together with you. Maybe you want to write down,
or simply
few things, or just talk to us.
We're not so many, so I think we have some kind of dropouts because of starving and late and lunch break. And
if you want to say something on that, please feel free, unmute yourself and just talk to us.
We flooded them.
Is there some way, perhaps, with for example, what? Sorry, I've forgotten his name. It's Marek.
Martin Marek.
Yeah, Martin. Yeah. Is there something like you know, is there some way that the things that we've presented today could be, you know, like would those sorts of things be useful to you in perhaps looking at trying to integrate this into your own work in some way? Like, is there something that we could provide to you, for example?
Well, definitely the information or the results, definitely. But this is just, I didn't want to write it down. It's just an email or a newsletter, you know, and I do not recommend for a project to do newsletters. It's no point, but I got your website. And just to explain a little bit more, I'm not an expert in this real estate development, but I'm in a department taking care of public funding. So we are trying to find public funding, and there we often have the problem to explain to the programs, for example, where we are applying to, why is our more or less normal business now suddenly research or innovative or development. And this co-creation sounded for me quite interesting because it gives us a new perspective to see on things. And of course, like I think it was mentioned by Mr. Martinuzzi before, this piloting thing, this could also help us to see more through we should try out more. Just on a pilot level, for example, most of the time the funding we almost never get funding for building a new apartment. If we find a certain concrete mixture which is completely not consuming or producing CO2, then probably could fund a building, but then we have the risks, and then we have to tear it down if it doesn't work. So we don't do that. But on the pilot level, we could try out a little bit more. And I see a lot of colleagues here which are willing to do and go to this in this path. So for me, this was just a very good opportunity to get some new ideas and new hints, because the day-to-day business is just building something and selling it. And yeah, this is difficult to justify research and development, which is sometimes and often also happening, but yeah, not most of the time. So from the project point of view, I think you have given a lot already to me, and I will look at the website now and see if I get some more hints and ideas. But I can't now formulate a concrete goal for your project.
How far is circular economy and how to deal with all this construction waste and all the resources you put into a building? Actually, you put a lot of valuable stuff into a building, and you need to know 40 or 50 years later what's in there to make use of it. Is there any push from this circular economy area for your sector?
Well, yes, definitely, but it happens on a very concrete level. Not and also, for example, concrete. We are using a lot of old parts of the buildings and recycle them. But this is happening automatically because the people are in demand of that, and the lawmaker tells us a lot of how to do things. So there has to happen a lot also there. Circular economy as a phrase is getting more and more into the organization. So sustainability department is taking care of that as well. And definitely, yes, it's a topic, and it's a topic, a daily topic for the colleagues developing mixtures for certain materials which we are using.
Okay, as I don't see any other hands up or people who want to talk. I'm very glad.
It might be worthwhile talking about Katrina Hilliard, who had to leave, but she did say that that they've recently launched an IoT smart town technology project with Cellnex in a town called Edenderry, or Edenderry as we call it. She says, I would love to hear more from a few of you on ideas for projects that could work in this new scenario. So it sounds like that there's some potential forward momentum there as well, that maybe we can follow up afterwards as well.
Okay, may I ask you as the speakers to wrap up and say maybe one sentence, if you want, about what you can take from today, or what you experienced today? May I start with Klaus-Peter Wegge? Still there? Anything that was new to you from our workshop? We can hear you.
Yeah, okay. The I got several impressions which are not considered very thoroughly yet. One impression is that we are looking always on small pieces of our society. For example, the building construction ends with selling the building. This is not true. It continues somewhere. We have a life cycle inside, and there are different responsibilities of companies in this life cycle. So I think we have to consider more the general view. I don't know how to bring this closely to the co-creation process, but it is a clear indication co-creation should consider the whole issue and not only parts of that. The other issue is that co-creation is, from my point of view, not the personal configuration of a flat. It's more collecting ideas to have destructive ideas, perhaps, for the living, for the society. Co-creation sometimes gives us ideas from, we'll say, people who are not knowledgeable about all the technical problems, and also they simply say, oh, we want this solution, how can we create it? And this is an issue we should focus on more in detail. So these are two outcomes. We should continue to consider that.
Thank you very much. Ed, do you want to make a short wrap up of what you can take home?
Well, the most important thing I take home is, again, from Catherine's workshop, but I knew that before already, the low-income families that are always neglected in all kinds of co-creation and co-design processes all over Europe in many years. And now we have shown, at least DMU has shown, that it's possible and very important. The other thing is that I think also in co-creation workshops in different needs to be cross-cultural. And that's, that said, you need, I think, expertise in these kind of workshops, or you need some, I don't know how to do that, but that's then for later on, to prepare the participants better. Because if you have, for instance, a person talking about hydrogen, which is now very modern, also in the construction world, shall we have hydrogen, at least in our country, let's say in the Netherlands, shall we have hydrogen for heating our houses because we want to get rid of our gas or not? And then you see a lot of ignorance with the status and the next 10 years where we go with hydrogen, green hydrogen, gray hydrogen, even blue hydrogen, and so on. So that disturbs a lot the co-creation and the innovation and the preparedness of all stakeholders to work on that. Okay, that's what I want to say.
Thank you very much. Catherine, you said a lot already, but anything, maybe a short, quick summary of what is interesting for you.
Thanks, Ursula. I think for me, really, it comes back to the same old issue of trying to sell these ideas. I mean, this is certainly something that responsible innovation has grappled with since it's begun. And I'm a technology ethicist. The idea of ethics is often seen by companies in particular as a roadblock or a stumbling block or whatever, and sometimes companies can see these sorts of approaches as slowing down the process, or causing roadblocks or whatever. But really, it's about shifting that mindset away from the fact that these are more about eliciting ideas from outside the mainstream and asking questions about, do we have to do it the same way that we did it last time? Is there a new way that we can try that allows us to be more inclusive, or allows us to design better things for people who are actually using them every day, as opposed to us who just kind of look at them from afar. And I think that's always been a challenge for these, particularly for some of these methods that might take longer or be slightly more expensive to run or whatever it is. But we've certainly seen how fruitful they can be. We've certainly seen that they can add value and that they allow for people to really kind of in some ways take some agency over the spaces that they're living in and the technology that they interact with and that sort of thing. So I think I can see that this is an opening path in the smart city world, and I think that, you know, it's been really nice to hear the perspectives today from people who are struggling in some ways with the same issues that we've been struggling with as well. So yeah, we're all in it together. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much, Catherine. And Andre, what is your conclusion from this?
I like this. We're all in this together. Yes, that's humanity. That's sustainability. And for me, the interesting question is, how can we play with the different levels? I get the impression that, for example, if Catherine and I have a discussion about ethics, we can have a bilateral discussion. We could say, dear company so-and-so, you have to talk about. But perhaps some dialogues are the right dialogues on societal level. And I've learned that from the statement of Martin Marek, that there might also be some sectorial lock-ins, some cultural lock-ins in a specific sector, and they have some basic narratives. They have the narrative, it's all about the market, you know, profits, competition. This is a kind of hunter-gatherer predator narrative. And we could go to a co-creation and gardener narrative to say, yeah, we're all in this together. So let's co-create it. But this means to shift these basic narratives that you find in certain regions, cultures, sector, businesses. So it's all about changing the narratives. That's interesting.
Okay. And you just posted some information in the chat on a webinar.
Yeah, there will be a lot of upcoming webinars. I've posted them already. We run 2 webinars every month now. So we're in a very intensive phase now to share what we learned, to co-create even some things based on what we've done. If you're interested in that, join us. Website living-innovation.net. The rest you find there.
Okay. Up to me to say thank you very much for all the participants that you were here and you share some of your thoughts with us and you listen to us. And it's up to me to say goodbye and wish you a short break until the next session starts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ursula, for the facilitation. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.